Caspian Hawthorne had everything a man could desire: youth, wealth, and the power that came with being the CEO of Hawthorne Industries. From the corner office on the top floor of a Manhattan skyscraper, he commanded respect and fear in equal measure. Yet, behind the polished marble desk and expensive suit, there was an emptiness in his life that all his success couldn't fill. Caspian preferred it that way. He kept his heart guarded behind walls of ice, convinced that love was a luxury he didn't need. But fate had other plans. On a chilly autumn afternoon, Caspian sat in a mahogany-paneled lawyer's office, facing the reading of his late father's will. His father, the founder of the company, had been the only person who ever dared to push Caspian toward a more balanced life. Now, even from the grave, the old man's final wish echoed in the silent room, in order to inherit the majority stake. Of Hawthorne Industries, Caspian must be married by the age of 30, and stay married for at least 1 full year. If he failed, control of the company would pass to his cousin, a scheming executive who had long coveted Caspian's position. Caspian clenched his jaw as the terms were laid out. He was 29. His 30th birthday was mere months away. He had no serious relationships, no fiancée waiting in the wings. The idea of marriage had always been a distant notion, something he'd figured he might entertain in the far-off future, if ever. Now it had become a ticking clock, threatening to strip away everything he had worked for. For the first time in years, Caspian felt truly cornered. His father's stipulation wasn't about the money or the company. It was a posthumous attempt to save his son from a lifetime of solitude. But to Caspian, it felt like blackmail coated in fatherly concern. He left the lawyer's office with a storm brewing in his chest. As he slid into the back seat of his chauffeured car, the city lights of New York flickered to life in the dusk. Skyscrapers and neon signs blurred past the windows, while Caspian's mind raced. Marriage, in a matter of months, to a woman he didn't even know yet. It was unthinkable. Yet, losing everything he and his father had built was equally unthinkable. He had to find a solution, no matter how unorthodox. Staring out at the city streets, he realized there was only one pragmatic approach: treat the matter like a business deal. If he needed a wife to fulfill the will's conditions, he would acquire one the same way he'd acquired any valuable asset, through a contract, clear terms, and a price both parties could accept. That night, in the silence of his penthouse apartment high above the city, Caspian opened his laptop and typed out a plan. He listed the qualities required: someone discreet who understood. This was a temporary arrangement, someone in need of financial help, who would accept a transactional marriage, and someone with whom he could plausibly appear in love for the public and the board. Love itself was not on the list. It never was for him. This would be a business arrangement, pure and simple. As he scrolled through a list of potential candidates compiled by a trusted private agency, Caspian steeled himself. He would pay a woman to be his wife, fulfill the will's demands for 1 year, and then part ways. No complications, no emotions. It was the perfect plan to solve the CEO's dilemma. Or so he thought. Isla Thompson juggled 2 jobs and an ever-mounting pile of bills in a tiny corner of Brooklyn. Originally from a small town in the Midwest, she had come to New York, chasing a dream, only to find herself living paycheck to paycheck. Her days were spent serving coffee in a cafe, and her nights cleaning offices in the same gleaming skyscrapers she once hoped to work in. Despite the exhaustion, Isla's spirit remained kind and hopeful. She smiled through her struggles, determined to support her family back home. Her father's medical bills and her younger brother's college tuition depended on her. She carried those responsibilities on her slender shoulders without complaint. That fateful week, Isla received a mysterious phone call. A formal voice from an elite employment agency invited her to interview for a lucrative personal assistance opportunity. Confused, she hadn't applied for any such job. She initially thought it was a scam, but the agency representative mentioned her name had been given by a former colleague who remembered Isla's hard-working nature. They insisted this was a legitimate, high-paying role for a very private client who needed someone trustworthy immediately. With her family's needs weighing on her mind, Isla decided to take the chance. Even if it sounded too good to be true, she couldn't afford not to explore it. 2 days later, Isla found herself stepping into a sleek, upscale office high above Manhattan, Caspian Hawthorne's personal domain. Nervously smoothing down her simple blue dress, she could scarcely imagine why a billionaire CEO would need her as an assistant. When Caspian entered the room, tall and commanding with steely grey eyes and an air of authority, Isla's breath caught. She recognized him from magazines and news segments, an enigmatic young mogul with a reputation as cold as the marble floors beneath her feet. He was intimidating, yes, but also strikingly handsome in person, which only made her more anxious. Caspian studied the woman in front of him. Isla's file said she was 24, college-educated but fallen on hard times. There was a quiet strength in her posture, despite her evident nervousness. Strands of her chestnut hair escaped a loose bun, framing delicate features, and bright hazel eyes that darted around the luxurious office. She looked out of place here, and yet something about her earnestness and the way she seemed to stand her ground intrigued him. He had interviewed 2 other candidates earlier. One had been starstruck and overly eager to please, the other blatantly interested only in the paycheck. But Isla, he sensed, was different. She was cautious, sincere, perhaps even desperate, though she hid it well. "Thank you for coming, Miss Thompson," Caspian began, gesturing for her to sit. His voice was smooth but detached, as if he were discussing a routine business project. Isla perched at the edge of a leather chair, clutching her purse. She expected questions about her experience or skills, but what followed was entirely unforeseen. "I have a proposal for you," he said, folding his hands on the desk. "It's unconventional, but I assure you it's mutually beneficial. What I'm about to say must remain strictly confidential, understood?" Isla nodded hesitantly, heart pounding. Caspian continued, measuring each word. "I need a wife, temporarily. This would be a 1-year contract marriage, a business arrangement. You will receive substantial compensation. In return, you must maintain the appearance of a devoted spouse in public. After the term, we part ways. No strings attached." A stunned silence filled the room. Isla blinked, certain she must have misheard. Excuse me." "A what?" she stammered, heat rising to her cheeks. "A contract marriage," Caspian repeated calmly, as if discussing the weather. "Purely legal and for show. I will pay you $500,000 for 1 year of your time as my wife." He said the sum casually, but Isla nearly gasped. That amount could change her life and her family's forever. Her mind reeled. Marry a stranger? For money? It sounded like something out of a movie or a scam. Isla's initial reaction was to refuse outright. She opened her mouth to protest, a flurry of emotions battling within. Disbelief, fear, even a touch of indignation at the outrageous proposition. However, the thought of her father's hospital bills and her brother's tuition flashed in her mind. That kind of money could secure their futures, maybe even allow her to pursue her own dreams afterward. It was a devil's bargain. Sacrifice a year of her life and lie to the world in exchange for financial freedom. "Why me?" Isla managed to ask, voice trembling slightly. She needed to understand. Out of all the women in the world he could have chosen or hired, why had this billionaire settled on a struggling nobody like her? Caspian's cool gaze held hers. "My sources tell me you're trustworthy, that you value family and responsibility. You're not the type to sell your story to tabloids or try to extort more. And frankly, you need the money." His blunt assessment made Isla flinch, but she couldn't deny it. He continued, "In return, you'd be giving up a year of your life to live under a microscope with me. We would have to convince everyone our marriage is real. My company's board, the media, even my family, if need be. I'll take care of all your needs, and your family will be provided for. After the contract ends, you walk away with the money and a mutually agreed upon story of an amicable divorce." Caspian's tone remained matter-of-fact, but there was an intensity in his eyes as he awaited her answer. For a moment, his confident demeanor faltered just enough for Isla to catch. A glimpse of something almost vulnerable. He truly needed her to say yes. Isla's thoughts swirled like a whirlwind. She thought of her gentle father, hooked to tubes at the hospital, of her teenage brother working nights to help make ends meet, of the dreams she had put on hold. This arrangement was crazy, certainly risky. Her heart could get hurt, her reputation could suffer if the truth emerged. Yet, in that moment, the scales tipped. This marriage might be fake, but the hope it could buy for her real life was priceless. Taking a shaky breath, Isla looked up at Caspian. "If I agree, we'd need clear terms," she said softly, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. Caspian nodded, a hint of relief in his eyes. "Of course. Everything will be put in writing." He pulled out a draft contract, already prepared by his lawyers. It outlined the 1-year term, the financial arrangement, non-disclosure, agreements, and even behavioral clauses about public appearances, and a requirement to wear a wedding ring at all times in public. Isla skimmed the pages with trembling hands. One clause caught her eye, and she read it aloud. No romantic or intimate. Expectations, beyond what's necessary for public appearance. She glanced up, cheeks warm. Caspian cleared his throat, perhaps the slightest hint of awkwardness piercing his cool facade. "I mean that you won't be obligated to do anything you don't want to. This is strictly business. Any, closeness would be solely for show when others are around. Your privacy will be respected." Isla felt simultaneously relieved and oddly disappointed by that clarification. She wasn't looking for romance in this deal, and certainly physical intimacy was a complicated idea with a stranger. But hearing him state it so plainly caused an unexpected pang in her chest that she quickly brushed aside. The contract also specified she would move into his penthouse and attend events as his wife. In private, they could live separate lives as long as no one found out. They agreed on a cover story of a whirlwind romance and quick wedding to explain the sudden marriage. Her head spinning, Isla realized this was actually going to happen. Summoning all the courage she had, she picked up the pen. "All right," she said, heart thudding as she signed her name beside Caspian's bold signature. "I'll do it." And just like that, Ayla Thompson sold 1 year of her life to Caspian Hawthorne. As she left the office that day, contract in hand, she couldn't help but wonder what exactly she had signed up for. Neither of them could foresee how much this cold transaction was about to change them both. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Caspian wasted no time orchestrating a quiet civil ceremony. He wanted to keep the marriage under wraps until it was advantageous to announce, so a quick courthouse wedding with only a lawyer and a witness present sealed their legal bond. One cool morning, Isla found herself standing beside Caspian at City Hall, saying vows that felt surreal. There was no white dress or flowers. She wore a simple cream-colored skirt suit that Caspian's assistant had hastily procured. Caspian slipped a modest yet elegant diamond ring onto her finger. As she repeated the words "I do," her voice barely above a whisper. His own "I do" was firm, resolute, as if finalizing a business merger. When it was done, Isla Thompson had legally become Isla Hawthorne. Caspian offered a polite handshake after they signed the marriage certificate, which she found oddly formal and a little comical, shaking hands with one's brand new husband. He must have caught the flicker of a smile on her face, because his stern expression softened for a heartbeat. He cleared his throat and suggested they head to his penthouse. That would be her new home, effective immediately. Isla's eyes widened when she stepped into Caspian's penthouse for the first time. It occupied the top floor of a luxury high-rise with floor-to-ceiling, windows offering a breathtaking view of the New York skyline. The interior was sleek and modern, black, white, and grey with accents of glass and steel. Everything gleamed with wealth and pristine cleanliness, almost to the point of feeling antiseptic. As she wandered into the living area, her reflection ghosted in the polished surfaces. She felt like a visitor in a museum rather than a wife in a new home. A distinguished older man in a suit approached with a courteous nod. "Mrs. Hawthorne, welcome," he greeted, taking Ayla by surprise until she remembered, "That's me now." Caspian stepped in, introducing him. "This is Bernard, the house manager. Anything you need, Bernard will arrange it." Bernard gave a warm smile that set Ayla a bit at ease. "It's a pleasure, Mum. We're happy to have you here." She sensed the staff had been informed of her arrival, yet none showed any hint that this marriage was unusual. They treated her with the respect due to the lady of the house, leaving Ayla feeling both flustered and grateful. After a brief tour of the penthouse, 4 bedrooms, an expansive kitchen outfitted with appliances she'd never used, a library, a home office, and a terrace with a rooftop garden, Caspian paused outside the master bedroom. He hesitated, then opened a door across the hall instead, revealing a spacious guest suite. "This will be your room," he said evenly. Ayla peeked in at the elegantly furnished suite, complete with its own bathroom and a view of Central Park. It was larger than her entire old apartment. "Thank you," she replied quietly, relief and odd disappointment mixing inside her. They had agreed on separate rooms, of course, but the formality of it all reinforced that this was no typical marriage. They fell into an awkward silence, standing in the hallway as the weight of the day settled. Finally, Caspian spoke, his tone gentler than before. "I know this is a lot of change. If you need anything, clothes, personal items, Bernard can arrange shopping, or you can give him a list." Ayla realized she'd moved in with little more than a small suitcase. The situation had unfolded so quickly that she hardly had time to pack. I might need a few things," she admitted. Caspian nodded. "Take the day to settle in. Tomorrow we'll go out together and get you whatever you need. It might be good for us to be seen out and about." He was already thinking of appearances. A billionaire and his new bride on a shopping trip would quietly spread the news of his marriage in social circles, laying the groundwork before an official announcement. Ayla mustered a small smile. "All right. And thank you for understanding." He gave a curt, polite dip of his head and turned to leave. Before he could, Ayla added softly, "Caspian?" It was the first time she'd said his first name. He paused, glancing back at her in question. I wanted to say thank you for doing this. I know it's business," she hurriedly clarified, "but you're also helping me help my family. That means a lot." For a moment, Caspian was silent, his grey eyes searching her face. Ayla wondered if she'd overstepped by making it personal. But then he responded, "We're helping each other. So you're welcome." His voice was quiet, lacking the usual hardness. Something unspoken passed between them, a brief acknowledgement that despite the transactional nature of their arrangement, they were now in this together. With a faint, almost smile, Caspian left her to settle in, the sound of his footsteps echoing down the hall. Ayla closed the door of her suite and leaned against it, exhaling deeply. In the reflection of the mirror above a sleek dresser, she barely recognized the woman staring back, wedding band on her finger, living in a billionaire's home. She had entered a marriage without love, to a man known for his icy demeanor. But as she thought of that subtle softening in Caspian's eyes just now, she wondered if there was more to him beneath the cold exterior. One thing was certain, the year ahead would be unlike anything she had ever experienced. The first few weeks of Caspian and Ayla's marriage passed in a cautious rhythm. They lived more like polite roommates than husband and wife, careful not to overstep boundaries. Caspian left early for the office, often before Ayla woke up, and frequently returned late at night. In his absence, Ayla familiarized herself with her new life. She explored the penthouse, though she still felt like a guest tiptoeing through someone else's world. When she ventured into the kitchen to make herself breakfast, the private chef was astonished. Apparently Mr. Hawthorne usually took his meals out or had them prepared, and the notion of his wife frying her own eggs was unexpected. In fact, Ayla found small ways to occupy her time. One afternoon, moved by gratitude for all that Caspian was doing for her family, she decided to cook dinner as a gesture of thanks. Using the pristine kitchen, she prepared a simple homemade lasagna and a side of garlic bread, recalling it was one of her father's favorite dishes. When Caspian came home that night, looking fatigued from back-to-back meetings, he was greeted by the warm, comforting aroma of a home-cooked meal. He paused in the doorway of the dining area, visibly taken aback to find the dining table set for two with steaming dishes laid out. "What's all this?" he asked, loosening his tie. Isla wiped her hands nervously on a napkin. I made dinner. I thought it might be nice. You've been working so hard." She half expected him to be annoyed at the unasked gesture, but instead, Caspian's features softened. He rolled up his sleeves and took a seat. "It smells wonderful. I can't remember the last time I had a homemade meal." They ate together in a companionable quiet at first, the clink of silverware echoing in the spacious dining room. Finally, Caspian broke the silence. "This is delicious," he admitted. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Isla's face lit up at the compliment. "My mom taught me, when I was young. She always said food was a way to show you care." Mention of her mother made Isla fall silent for a moment. Her mother had passed some years ago, a loss that still ached quietly inside her. She busied herself with a bite of lasagna to hide the emotion flickering in her eyes. Caspian noticed the momentary sadness and gently changed the subject. "It's a nice change. I usually just grab something on the go or have the chef leave something if I'm late." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you, Isla," hearing her first name in his rich voice, and said with such sincerity, made her heart skip. She smiled, meeting his gaze. "It's the least I could do. You might be paying me to be your wife, but I still want to be useful." She laughed softly, trying to lighten the admission, and he gave a quiet chuckle. "You've more than earned your keep tonight," he replied, patting his stomach lightly in a rare show of humor. Not every interaction was as comfortable, but little by little, the ice between them began to thaw. Caspian discovered that Isla had a sharp wit behind her polite demeanor. One morning, as they prepared to step out for their public debut shopping trip, he found her staring, dubiously, at a $5,000 designer handbag an assistant had selected for her. "For that price, does it do my taxes too?" she quipped. Caspian was startled, then laughed, a genuine laugh that made his handsome face light up in a way Isla hadn't seen before. Bernard, the house manager, nearly dropped the coat he was holding. It was perhaps the first time he'd heard his boss truly laugh. Out in the city, they played their parts. Caspian led Isla through elite boutiques on Fifth Avenue, his hand resting at the small of her back in a show of gentle possessiveness whenever cameras were in sight. Isla, initially overwhelmed by the opulence, soon grew more confident under Caspian's reassuring guidance. She tried on outfits, elegant dresses, casual chic ensembles, shoes that cost more than her monthly rent back in Brooklyn, and each time she emerged from a fitting room, Caspian gave a slight nod of approval or offered a considerate opinion. He was surprisingly patient as she navigated this new world of high fashion. When she twirled shyly in a midnight blue evening gown, he had to clear his throat before murmuring, "It's beautiful on you." Isla blushed, the warmth in his eyes making her feel more like a bride being admired by her husband than a contractual partner. Paparazzi did catch wind of the billionaire's outing with an unknown young woman on his arm. By the next day, small gossip columns speculated about Caspian Hawthorne's mystery companion. The official announcement came soon after, a press release stating that Caspian had married a woman named Isla in a private ceremony. The news caused a stir. He had been one of New York's most eligible bachelors after all, but the public was left with scant details, only a studio portrait of the couple gazing into each other's eyes that Caspian's PR team had arranged. In it, Isla had been nervous, but Caspian subtly squeezed her hand right before the camera flashed, resulting in a photograph where her smile, fortunately, looked genuine. Not everyone was pleased by the marriage. At a company board meeting, Caspian faced a few raised eyebrows and pointed questions from senior board members and, notably, from his cousin, Darius Hawthorne. Darius had expected the company to fall into his hands had Caspian remained unmarried by 30. Now, Darius masked his frustration behind a tight smile as he congratulated Caspian in front of everyone. "We were all surprised to hear you wed so suddenly." "Cousin," Darius drawled during the meeting's coffee break, eyes flicking over Caspian as if searching for cracks. "Wherever did you find such a charming wife?" Caspian maintained a neutral smile, feeling an instinct to shield Isla from Darius's thinly veiled prying. "It was quite unexpected for me as well," he replied smoothly. "Sometimes, life takes you by surprise." Darius raised an eyebrow. Indeed it does. I do hope I get to know Ayla better, being family now and all. His words were polite, but the undertone was clear. Darius was suspicious. Caspian realized they'd have to be careful. Darius would likely watch for any sign that this marriage was a sham. When Caspian recounted this interaction to Ayla later that evening, she bit her lip nervously. Do you think he'll try to, expose us? Caspian reached out on impulse and gently squeezed her hand, another gesture that surprised them both. He can try. We just have to make sure we leave no room for doubt. We stick to our story. Ayla nodded, comforted not just by his words, but by the warmth of his hand on hers. She realized that at some point in the past weeks, she had stopped thinking of their interactions as mere performances. The smiles, the small touches, even the laughter, they felt real. And that both excited and terrified her. As autumn deepened, the two settled into a strange yet comforting routine. In public, they acted the perfect, affectionate couple. In private, they grew into tentative friends. Caspian found himself drawn to evenings at home rather than late nights at work. He told himself it was to keep up appearances, but the truth was he enjoyed Ayla's company. They would talk over dinner. Nothing too intimate yet, but enough that he learned she loved classic jazz music, and she learned he preferred tea over coffee at night. Some nights they watched a movie in the media room, sitting at opposite ends of the couch at first, though gradually that distance shortened. And when Ayla would fall asleep halfway through a film, head drooping to the side, Caspian would drape a soft blanket over her before quietly retiring to his own room, a gentle smile lingering on his face. To an outside observer, their life was picture perfect. Yet under the surface, both of them felt an undercurrent of something new and fragile. Ayla often lay in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, chastising herself. She was beginning to care, truly care, for Caspian. His kindness was no longer just part of an act. She saw the genuine thoughtfulness in him, the way. He remembered that she disliked olives, or how he ensured the car had her favorite music playing. These were small details, but they added up to a portrait of a man far different from the cold, distant boss she'd first met. For Caspian, the transformation was equally unsettling. He caught himself looking forward to coming home, to seeing Ayla's smile as he walked through the door. She had a way of making the penthouse feel warm, like a true home rather than a sterile luxury hotel. The more he learned of her gentle humor, her resilience, her selflessness, the more he respected and admired her. And admiration was slowly blossoming into affection, no matter how he tried to resist it. Winter's first touch was in the air when the undercurrents of secrecy in Ayla's life began to surface. By now, Ayla had been sending a portion of her generous monthly stipend to her family regularly. She spoke to her younger brother, Noah, on the phone at least once a week, checking on their father's condition. Though Caspian noticed her making frequent private calls, he never pried, respecting her privacy just as he promised. However, the secrecy weighed on Ayla. She hated keeping parts of her life hidden, but she worried that telling Caspian about her father's illness might complicate their arrangement. After all, she was supposed to be devoting herself to playing the role of his loving wife, not dealing with personal family crises. And a part of her feared Caspian would view her differently, either as a burden or as someone who only married him for the money to pay those hospital bills, a truth uncomfortably close to home. One brisk November evening, Ayla's phone rang as she and Caspian were finishing dinner. Seeing her brother's name, she excused herself and answered quietly in the next room. Caspian watched her go with a slight frown. Lately, he'd sensed something weighing on Ayla. There were moments he caught her staring off in thought, sadness clouding her eyes. Whenever he gently asked if something was wrong, she would put on a brave smile and say everything was fine. He didn't push her, but his concern grew. Now, as he absently sipped his wine, he could hear the faint murmur of her voice in the hall, strained and upset. When Ayla returned, her face was pale and her eyes shiny with unshed tears. "Is everything all right?" Caspian asked immediately, standing from the table. Ayla opened her mouth, as if to unload the truth, but then she visibly hesitated. She forced a tight smile that did nothing to hide her distress. "It's okay. I just have a family matter I need to take care of." Caspian's brow furrowed. His first instinct was to demand answers and help. He could see she was hurting, but her guarded posture stopped him. He remembered their boundaries. She had never explicitly shared about her family, his troubles, and he hadn't earned her trust enough for her to do so now. Reluctantly, he nodded. "If you need anything, or if you have to go somewhere, let me know. I can arrange the jet." Ayla swallowed hard, touched by his offer. "Thank you. I might need to take a trip home soon. I'll let you know." That night, Caspian hardly slept. Something was very wrong. Ayla had tried to act normal after that call. She even insisted on tidying up the kitchen to distract herself. But he noticed her hands trembling as she washed the dishes, and a glass had slipped and shattered. She'd laughed it off, but her eyes were full of worry. Caspian wanted to press her, to share her burden, but he couldn't forget the terms of their arrangement. Their lives were entwined by circumstance, not genuine commitment, at least not on paper. He feared that prying too much might remind her that this was all temporary, a thought that now made his chest ache. The very next day, fate intervened in the form of Darius. Caspian's cousin paid an unannounced visit to the penthouse under the guise of delivering some documents. He arrived in the afternoon, when Caspian was still at the office. Ayla, who was home, greeted Darius politely, if a bit awkwardly. She had met him only once at a corporate event, and his sly smiles put her on edge. Darius handed her an envelope for Caspian, but lingered in the foyer making small talk. He asked how she was adjusting, then casually inquired if she might join him for coffee sometime, saying he'd love to know the woman who stole his cousin's heart. Ayla gave a polite, but non-committal answer. She was relieved when Darius finally left, but the encounter left her uneasy. There was something predatory in his friendliness. Unbeknownst to Ayla, Darius had ulterior motives. That very evening, he set a trap. Through a mutual acquaintance, he had learned a bit about Ayla's background, including the fact that her father was ill. When Noah, Ayla's brother, arrived in New York by bus later that week to fetch his sister for an urgent visit home, their father's condition had worsened. Darius was having dinner at a restaurant across the street from the bus station. Whether by coincidence or cunning design, he spotted Ayla rushing into her brother's arms outside the terminal. She hugged Noah tightly, worry etched on her face as they spoke. Darius observed from a distance, his mind whirling. To him it looked like Ayla was embracing another man, one who was clearly not Caspian. A slow, satisfied smirk curled on Darius's lips. If he could capture this moment and twist it, it might be the evidence he needed to crack the facade of their marriage. He discreetly snapped a photo with his phone. That night, Caspian returned home to find the penthouse eerily quiet and Ayla gone. A hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter read, "Caspian, I had to fly home to take care of a family emergency. I'm sorry for leaving so suddenly. I'll be back in a few days." Worry flared in his chest. She hadn't waited for the jet. Likely she took the first commercial flight out to save time. He cursed under his breath for not insisting she confide in him. As he reread the note, his phone buzzed. An incoming text from Darius. Puzzled, he opened it to see an image that made his stomach drop, a grainy photo of Ayla in the arms of an unfamiliar young man outside the bus station. Below it, Darius had written, "Hate to be the bearer of bad news, cousin. Saw Ayla with someone. Thought you should know." Caspian's hands clenched around the phone. His mind raced with irrational scenarios. Was Ayla meeting a secret lover? Was this family emergency a lie? The image of her with another man sent a stab of something painfully like jealousy through him. He paced the living room, the old walls around his heart rebuilding brick by brick in his panic. How could he have been so foolish? He had begun to believe in her, care for her, and now, was it all a lie on her part? He recalled her distress in recent days and how she refused to tell him what was wrong. Had she been planning to leave him all along? By midnight, running on anger and hurt, Caspian made a decision. He would go after her. If nothing else, he needed to hear the truth from Ayla's own lips. The next morning, Caspian's private jet touched down in Ayla's sleepy Midwestern hometown. It wasn't hard to find her family's address from the background check he'd done before hiring her. He arrived at a modest, white-clapboard house with a small porch, just as the sun was rising pale and cold. Snow dusted the ground. Caspian's heart pounded as he knocked on the door, unsure what he would even say. Noah answered, instantly recognizing Caspian from photos Ayla had shown. The younger man's eyes widened in surprise. "Caspian Hawthorne," he exclaimed. Before Caspian could respond, Ayla appeared behind her brother in the doorway. She wore a cardigan over a wrinkled shirt, eyes puffy from worry and lack of sleep, and they went huge at the sight of him. "Caspian, what are you doing here?" she stammered, stepping onto the porch and closing the door behind her, signaling her brother to give them privacy. Caspian realized he had rehearsed no greeting. His emotions were a tangle of relief at seeing she was safe, leftover jealousy, and concern for why she'd come. His voice came out more coldly than he intended. "I could ask you the same thing. You disappeared without telling me the details, and then I received this." He pulled out his phone, showing her the photo Darius sent. "Imagine my shock," he said tightly, "seeing my wife in another man's arms." Ayla's eyes flicked to the photo and immediately filled with frustration and hurt. "That's my brother Noah," she said, voice trembling with a mix of anger and pain. "You'd know that if you'd trusted me enough to ask instead of barging in here with accusations." Caspian felt a flush of shame, the initial fire of his jealousy doused by her words. He had come all this way fearing the worst, and in doing so had revealed his own lack of faith in her. He opened his mouth to apologize, but Ayla wasn't done. Tears gathered in her eyes as the floodgates opened. "Yes, I left to handle a family emergency. I was going to come back as soon as I could. My father—" her voice cracked. "My father's in the hospital. He had a severe stroke, and he's not doing well." She wiped at her eyes. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to be a burden, and because this was supposed to be a business arrangement. I didn't think you wanted to hear about my personal problems." Caspian felt as though the ground beneath him had shifted. In an instant, all his selfish fears dissolved, replaced by concern and guilt. He reached out, hesitated, then gently cupped Ayla's shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice rough with remorse. "I jumped to conclusions and I was wrong. I should have listened. I do care about your problems, Ayla. Business arrangement or not, I care about you." Ayla looked up, searching his face, her own tears glistening. In his eyes, she saw genuine worry and regret, and something more, affection that couldn't be faked. Before either of them could speak again, the front door opened, and Noah peeked out. Ayla, Dad's awake. He's asking for you." She sniffled and nodded, giving Caspian an apologetic glance. "I have to go," he urged softly. "I'll be right here." Ayla hurried inside. Caspian took a moment to gather himself, running a hand through his hair. Darius's meddling now became clear. He must have intended to stir doubt. Caspian felt a surge of protectiveness. He wouldn't let Darius or anyone else hurt Ayla. When he entered the house a few minutes later, Noah led him to a small bedroom that smelled of antiseptic and worry. A middle-aged man lay in bed, looking frail and tired, with medical equipment humming nearby. Ayla sat at his bedside holding his hand. Her father's eyes flickered to Caspian in confusion. Ayla managed a soft smile, though her eyes were still red. "Dad, this is Caspian, my husband. Remember I told you about him?" Recognition dawned, and her father attempted a weak smile. "Ah, yes. The husband who came out of nowhere." His voice was thin but teasing. "I thought I might never get to meet you, son." Caspian stepped forward, feeling a lump in his throat at being addressed so kindly after how he had nearly bungled things. He gently shook the man's hand. "It's good to meet you, sir. I'm only sorry it's under these circumstances. I came as soon as I heard." Ayla shot him a grateful glance at the white lie. She knew he came for other reasons initially, but now he was here truly supporting her. Her father nodded weakly. "You've got a good girl here, stubborn as her mother was." He patted Ayla's hand. "She didn't want to tell me much about her sudden marriage, but I suspect she was trying to protect me from worry." He gave Ayla a knowing look and then gazed back at Caspian. "Take care of her, will you? I can't be around forever." Caspian's chest tightened. The weight of the man's trust and Ayla's silent plea in her eyes compelled him. He moved beside Ayla and placed an arm lightly around her shoulders. "I will," he promised. "You have my word." Her father seemed to relax at that, as if a burden had lifted. He closed his eyes, the effort of staying awake clearly exhausting him. Ayla leaned over to kiss her father's forehead. "I'll be here when you wake up, Dad," she whispered. Moments later, the older man dozed off peacefully. Ayla remained by his side, her hand still in his. Caspian kept his arm around her, offering silent comfort. In that quiet room, with machines beeping softly and the twilight gathering, beyond the window, Caspian felt something profound shift inside him. This woman, the one he had initially seen as an asset to win a deal, had become so much more. Seeing her here, vulnerable yet strong for her family, stirred in him an overwhelming urge to never see her hurt again. He realized with stunning clarity that it wasn't just duty or compassion he felt, he was in love with Ayla. The revelation was both terrifying and exhilarating. His father's scheme, the contract, none of it mattered now as much as the woman by his side. Ayla turned to him then, tears slipping free down her cheeks. Caspian gently brushed a tear away with his thumb. Without thinking, he leaned in and pressed a tender kiss to her forehead. Ayla closed her eyes at the gentle contact, a soft gasp escaping her. When she looked up into his eyes, there was no hiding the feelings flowing between them, gratitude, longing, and love unspoken. In that tender moment, Ayla felt safe. Caspian's arms around her felt like the promise of a shelter she'd yearned for. She rested her head against his chest, letting his warmth steady her racing heart. Neither of them said the words yet, but the way Caspian held her close through the dark hours of that night said enough. "I'm here, and I care for you deeply." And Ayla's fingers clutching his shirt as she leaned into him replied in kind, "Thank you. I need you." Ayla's father improved over the next 2 days. With Caspian quietly paying for the best specialists, the danger passed, and the doctors assured them he would recover with time and care. Throughout that period, Caspian rarely left Ayla's side. In the small-town hospital ward, the billionaire CEO looked decidedly out of place in his tailored coat among plastic chairs and vending machines, but he was there, fetching water, talking with her brother, holding Ayla's hand during the worst moments. In those days, any pretense between them melted away. They might not have spoken the exact words, but every gesture said, "We have each other." When they returned to New York, winter had blanketed the city in holiday lights and a thin layer of snow. Christmas was approaching, and with it, Caspian's 30th birthday, and the 1-year deadline for the marriage contract not far behind. Yet the contract felt like a distant formality now. Caspian knew without a doubt that he wanted Ayla in his life beyond that year, beyond any contract, forever if she would have him. He planned to tell her as much, to lay everything on the line. But first, he had to deal with one loose end, Darius. Word had spread within the company that Darius had been sniffing around about Caspian's marriage. Some rumors even made their way into tabloids, implying the CEO's bride might be living a double life. Caspian was furious, not just at the slander, but that Ayla might see these and be hurt. He swiftly ordered his legal team to issue warnings to any outlet printing rumors. Still, Darius was a problem that had to be handled directly. At the next Hawthorne Industries board meeting, Caspian made sure Ayla attended. By his side, a highly unusual move, since spouses rarely came to these meetings. But he wanted her there, and she, though nervous, stood by him in quiet support. Darius sat across the table, surprise flickering in his eyes when he saw Ayla in the boardroom. Caspian, with a calm authority, began the meeting with usual business. Only at the end did he address the personal matter. "Before we conclude, I have an announcement," Caspian said, reaching out to take Ayla's hand in his. She gave him a curious glance. This part wasn't in their original plan. Caspian's voice carried confidence as he continued. "Many of you know I'm married. This past year, meeting the stipulations of my late father's will. What you may not know is that it was the best decision of my life. He turned and offered Ayla a smile that made her cheeks warm. I didn't just fulfill a requirement, I found someone who makes me a better man. Someone I love. A murmur rippled around the table. Darius looked as though he'd bitten into a lemon. One director chuckled, "Well, I'll be." Never thought I'd hear Caspian Hawthorne talk like that. Caspian squeezed Ayla's hand gently. "With that said, I intend to continue as CEO with my partner by my side. I trust this settles any concerns about the stability of my personal life or commitment to the company." His eyes locked with Darius's, and an unspoken challenge passed between them. Darius cleared his throat, forcing a tight smile. "Of course. Congratulations, cousin." He could not openly counter such a declaration without exposing his own scheming. The rest of the board congratulated the couple warmly, and the meeting adjourned on a positive note. As people filtered out, Darius hung back, approaching Caspian and Ayla privately. "Touching speech," he said to Caspian, voice dripping with insincerity. "You certainly put any rumors to rest." Caspian met his gaze evenly. There was never any truth to them. "I suggest you remember that." Darius's smile faltered, a flicker of defeat in his eyes. Without another word, he spun on his heel and left. Caspian felt a weight lift. His cousin's ploys had failed. Ayla exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her heart was pounding from Caspian's public confession of love. As soon as they were alone in the empty boardroom, she turned to him. "Caspian, what you said, did you mean it?" He took both her hands in his. Every word. "Ayla, this may have started as a contract, but it became real to me a long time ago." He searched her eyes, his own filled with vulnerability and hope. "I love you. I'm sorry I waited this long to say it outright. I love you more than I thought I could ever love anyone." Tears of joy sprang into Ayla's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered, a radiant smile breaking across her face. "I think I fell in love with you somewhere between you laughing at my bad jokes and holding me through the worst night of my life." Caspian let out a soft laugh, relief and happiness evident in his features. He cupped her face gently. "You have changed my life, Ayla. You thawed a heart I didn't even realize was frozen solid." Ayla leaned into his hand. "And you showed me that love can be safe and kind and real." He drew her into his arms then, right there in that boardroom where they'd first faked their relationship in front of others, now holding her for no one else's benefit but their own. Their kiss was tender and deep, a seal on the promises made and the hardships overcome. Ayla felt a wave of pure elation. This was no act, no pretense. Caspian's love was real, and so was hers. Against all odds, what began as an arrangement born of desperation and fear had blossomed into something true and beautiful. Love had conquered pride, fear, and even the designs of those who wished ill upon them. Spring arrived with new beginnings. On the first anniversary of their courthouse wedding, Caspian and Ayla decided to renew their vows, this time out of love and in the presence of those they cared about. In a small, heartfelt ceremony on the rooftop garden of the penthouse, Ayla walked down a makeshift aisle on her father's arm. Her father, much recovered and beaming with pride, gave her hand to Caspian. Under an arch of white roses, with Noah and a few close friends as witnesses, they pledged themselves to each other. Again, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health. And this time, every word rang true. When Caspian kissed his bride, there were tears and applause, but most of all, there were smiles of genuine happiness. Their journey had been anything but ordinary. What started as a cold transaction blossomed into a warm, loving marriage. Caspian's heart, once locked behind ambition and cynicism, was opened by Ayla's compassion and strength. And Ayla found in Caspian a partner who supported her dreams and cared for her family as his own. Together, they turned a facade into something real and lasting. The spring air in New York was tender, carrying with it the faint perfume of blooming cherry blossoms that lined the city streets. On the rooftop garden of their penthouse, where just months earlier they had renewed their vows, Caspian Hawthorne leaned against the railing, watching the city skyline with uncharacteristic softness in his eyes. But his gaze wasn't on the horizon tonight. It was on the soft golden light spilling from the nursery window just inside, where Ayla sat rocking their newborn daughter. Caspian had thought he knew every form of success, every measure of power. He had built empires, signed billion-dollar contracts, and faced down rivals without blinking. But nothing had prepared him for the sheer wonder that overtook him the moment he first held his daughter in his arms. The night of her birth had been unlike any other in his life. Ayla's labor had begun in the quiet hours before dawn, shattering the fragile stillness of the penthouse. Caspian, usually so composed under pressure, had stumbled out of bed in a panic when Ayla's first contractions hit. He'd barely remembered how to tie his shoes, let alone summon the driver. Ayla, breathless but still smiling through the pain, teased him gently, the great Caspian Hawthorne, undone by a baby. Hours later, in a private maternity suite where city lights glowed, through wide windows, their daughter's first cries filled the room. Ayla, exhausted but radiant, looked down at the tiny bundle laid on her chest. Caspian stood beside her, his hand trembling as he brushed his fingers over the baby's soft cheek. She's perfect," he whispered, his voice breaking in a way that shocked even him. Ayla's hazel eyes glistened as she smiled up at him. "She's ours, Caspian. Can you believe it?" He couldn't. Not fully, but as the tiny infant grasped his finger with impossible strength, Caspian knew that his heart, once a fortress of stone, had been breached completely. The weeks that followed were both humbling and transformative. Caspian, the man who had once lived by rigid schedules and controlled outcomes, found himself utterly at the mercy of a newborn's unpredictable rhythms. Board meetings had to wait when his daughter needed to be fed. Business calls were muted, so he could hear her soft breathing as she slept on his chest. At first, he felt clumsy, terrified he might do something wrong. Changing diapers left him sweating, and rocking her to sleep felt like the most delicate negotiation of his career. But Ayla was patient, guiding him with gentle confidence. Together, they learned, and together they grew. One evening, after finally soothing the baby into sleep, Caspian whispered to Ayla, "Do you think I'll be good enough for her?" Ayla, nestled against his side, pressed her lips to his shoulder. "You already are. The fact that you're asking that question means she's got the best father she could ever dream of." Her words sank deep, settling into the part of him that had once doubted whether love or family was meant for him. Now, every time he looked at their daughter's tiny face, he knew the truth. He had finally found his purpose. When the time came to name their daughter, it wasn't a debate, but a quiet conversation under soft lamplight. "I was thinking," Ayla began, holding the baby close. "What about Elara? It means bright star." Caspian looked down at the child, her eyes fluttering open as if responding to the sound of her name. "Elara Hawthorne," he repeated, testing the weight of it. A rare smile spread across his face. "It suits her. She'll be our light." Ayla nodded, tears shimmering. "She already is." From that day forward, Elara's name became the heartbeat of their home. Caspian whispered it every night as he kissed her tiny forehead. Ayla sang it softly when she lulled her to sleep. And the world, once measured in stock prices and boardroom victories, now revolved around the quiet miracle in their arms. Months passed, and with them came new joys and new challenges. Caspian found himself trading late-night corporate dinners for bedtime stories. He took pride not only in Elara's first smiles, but also in the way Ayla's. Laughter filled the nursery as they fumbled through parenthood together. On weekends, they escaped the city to Ayla's small hometown, where her father, now much healthier, cradled his granddaughter with reverence. "I didn't think I'd live to see this day," he said once, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Caspian, watching him with quiet respect, placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You'll see her grow, sir. I promise you that." In those moments, Caspian realized how far he had come. Once he had seen marriage as a contract, love as a distraction, and family as a burden. Now, family was his greatest treasure. In the end, Caspian and Ayla built a life filled with the warmth of trust and the light of love. The billionaire who thought he had everything discovered that without love he had nothing, and the young woman who thought she was sacrificing her life found a partnership richer than any contract could ever promise. Together, they turned a year-long contract into a lifetime of love, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary love stories grow from the most unlikely of beginnings. And to you, dear listener, thank you for staying with me until the very end of their journey. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this story with someone who still believes in second chances. And if you're new here, welcome. Subscribe and stay close, because more stories of love, hope, and healing await you in the vault.